couple days until the break. I appreciate you all being here. If you're like our family, you're maybe dragging yourself to the finish line. So it means even more that you are here this morning and ready to learn and think. So thank you all. Today we are going to be talking about keeping the connection and staying connected and in touch with your adolescent children. Even if you have younger ones, I think you're going to get some good information from this. It's really all about how we maintain our relationship with our children throughout their developmental stages and lifespan. So just to get started, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Leilani, and I am the owner of Wildflower Family Collective Coaching and Mediation. And I'm also a member of the ASD community, although mine are a little bit younger. So I've got one in K2 and pre-K and maybe a future Falcon on the way in a few months. So I'm very much a member, and this community is very important to me. So I'm here in kind of two parts this morning. But in my professional life, what I do for work, and also in my family as well, is supporting individuals, supporting families. So what this really means, and if you've been to a talk before, I always say this spiel, is that I'm really passionate, and I really think that the outside world is chaotic enough. The news, the traffic, Dubai sometimes, right? Our life outside of our homes are chaotic enough. We all deserve, and our children deserve, to go home at the end of the day and feel peace, and feel calm, and feel connection. And so that is my goal, is to help individuals, couples, parents, whole families feel peaceful and more connected, and feel respected in their homes, so that it's kind of your solace in the midst of a crazy outside world. So I want to get to know you all a little bit, just so I know who is here and where you're coming from. So let's just start with the ages, or kind of what children you have in your home. So if you have, let's say, 0 to ELC age children, if you could just raise your hands. Great. How about elementary school age children? Amazing. And middle school? Oh, we got a good range here. And high school? Well done for being here. And lastly, past high school. Okay. We have some nervous faces there thinking about that stage afterwards in the next few years. It'll be okay, I promise. I hope this information helps you to feel more relieved that will be okay as well. Great. Now I know a little about you. So we will be talking more about adolescence, but like I said, this is coming up for all of us. It's going to be faster than we think to have teenagers and even college-age students, and this information is really going to be talking about a pretty wide range. So just to get an idea, when I say teenagers, what do you all think of? Maybe stereotypes, maybe your own experience, maybe how you were as a teenager. What do we know or kind of assume about teenagers? I'm going to drink your coffee, take a sip of coffee, and need you all to let me know. What do you think?
Awkward.
What's that?
Awkward.
Awkward, yeah, for sure. What else?
Erratic.
Erratic, yeah, we're off to a good start. Yeah, what else?
Disconnected.
Disconnected, good.
Passionate.
Passionate. Spoken like a true professional who works with teenagers. The strengths-based approach, I like it. What else?
Apathetic.
Apathetic, emotional, yep. Transformation, yeah, good. So there's a wide range, and I would say probably about half of what we just came up with was words that are maybe a bit scary coming from the parent perspective. They're kind of intense. There's plenty of pop culture songs about the craziness of teenagehood, right? They're passionate. It's a big part of someone's life. And so this is also a big part for parents' lives as well, right? It's a little bit different from when we were teenagers, being on the other side, making sure that they're safe and learning and thriving and maybe emotional, maybe erratic, maybe awkward, but still moving in the right direction, yeah? For those of you, even if you have middle schoolers or adolescents, elementary, or maybe what you're anticipating, what are unexpected strengths or things that you enjoy about teenagers? Or we'll say even from like 9 years on. Some strengths they have. We mentioned that they're passionate, yeah.
We could talk more in depth about different topics.
Yeah.
Almost like any topic.
Yeah, you can have more like real conversations with them, and they're like actually pretty smart and in tune. Yeah, for sure. What else?
More independent.
More independent, absolutely. Is someone gonna say something over here?
Reflective, they reflect.
Reflective.
They're able to have that conversation.
Yeah, they're becoming more mature, right? Which makes it fun as adults to engage with them because we can have real conversations. What about unexpected challenges or stressors at this stage? Or ones that you're feeling anxious about already if you're not quite there yet?
Peer pressure, but also the desire to belong to a group and be part of it and do whatever it takes.
Yeah, for sure. That peer pressure wanting to fit in and what they might be willing to do or not do for that. Yeah, great one. What else?
How to balance being a friend versus being a parent. So they tell you everything, but at the
Yeah.
same time you can
Yeah.
guide them, so.
Yeah, that boundary aspect of it. Like, be close, but also still the parent. Yeah, good one. Anything else?
It's also that, yes, they are already maturing, but also they have still the baby side. And sometimes they go from one to another.
Yeah, so they're mature, but maybe that's a bit of a trick sometimes to
Yeah.
not play that. We're going to talk a lot about that in this talk. Yeah. Did someone else have something over here that you wanted to add?
I wanted to say it's not, maybe it's also in line, so it's not necessarily being stubborn, it's like once they decide something, they want to go in that direction, and you're trying to like,
Yeah.
you know, like maybe think about this, and it's like, no, this is
They're
what I want.
determined.
Very
We'll put it as
yes,
determined.
yes.
Yes, they know what they want, and they're pretty certain about it, and they can debate it at this point too, right? It's a little bit more logical versus a toddler who feels similarly, but they want you to run out in the middle of the road, so that's a little bit more easy. Yeah, absolutely, great one. Anything else before we move on? By the way, just to mention, I actually won't have to do any of these unexpected challenges and stressors because me and my partner have agreed that I do the younger years and he does the older ones. And I think that he still doesn't know that he has the worst end of the deal. But sometimes this is going to apply to me because I get to clock out as soon as they hit teenage years. Okay, so let's talk about adolescence today. So I'm going to move in and use the term adolescence a bit more because it does cover a wider range and does include the teenage years as well. But this is really what we're going to talk about today is adolescence. So for a definition, adolescence is the transition between childhood and adulthood, spanning between around 9 to 24 years old. Now, I don't know about you all, but that is a huge span of time to me. And actually, this amount of years has changed in the recent past. So it used to be much shorter. It used to be more like 12 to 20-ish, kind of what I would have considered, or when I was learning about this information at first, would have considered adolescence. But as time has gone on, the social norms of adolescence has expanded. So what we consider adolescence and what we consider this developmental stage of not quite a child but not an adult yet has gotten bigger, and we anticipate it to be increasing even more as time goes on. And part of the reason for this is just where our world is at, where our society is at, and how we're preparing or maybe under-preparing children at this stage. So some of the reasons for this, they're overexposed to information before they're ready. So the internet is fantastic, right? Even with AI, we have all this access to information, and our children have access to it as well. They're learning amazing things at this school. And also, sometimes they're getting more than they can handle, or more than they knew in the past. So it's a lot to process. They have a lot of information, and they're maybe overexposed to things that they're not emotionally or socially ready to process and really handle. And then on the other hand, they're underexposed to firsthand experience later than they're ready. So they have all this information, but to actually use it and be hands-on or use it in their own lives, either at school or in a social situation or when they're going off and leaving the nest, they don't have that experience, so they're not sure how to kind of function. And that's how we see, and what we really see, this increased age of adolescence going into And some reports even say adolescence is toward mid, like 26 years old, okay? Because they don't have that exposure, they're not ready to kind of exist in the real world without us really scaffolding them. But it's not all bad news. They are advanced in other ways. They're cognitively advanced and they're biologically advanced. So that means that they're hitting those developmental milestones faster. Puberty is coming faster. Cognitively, like we discussed earlier, they're quite with it. They can have an intellectual conversation. They can be philosophical. They can be reflective. They can have mature conversations and really process information. And their bodies also present to us like, hey, look, I'm an adult now, sooner than you thought. So we treat them more like adults. But they're socially and emotionally behind. And of course, this is talking broad stereotypes, right? This is not every single individual child. This is not every single individual population of children. But if we're talking about the generation as a whole, and as kind of a broad generalization, this generation of children is socially and emotionally behind. And really what that looks like, I'm sure some of our staff that work within the school can attest to this, is that when they're interacting with their friends, when they're coping with hard things and they have stress in their life, they're not fully prepared to handle it like we might expect. And this matters even more when they're becoming those later teenage years, when they're going to university or when they're leaving the family home, and socially they're a mess, emotionally they're a mess because they don't have the skills quite yet, and they're not quite where we would expect them to be. Of course, we won't expect them to be socially and emotionally fully ready in teenage years and adolescent years, but from what the research shows is that they are a bit behind in this way. But it tricks us because cognitively and biologically they are quite put together and doing really well and even advanced. So we think, right, they've got the grades, they've got the knowledge, they've got the reflection, send them off. And this goes along with an idea of them being kind of independent as well, right? If your child is standing in front of you and has a really good argument for why they should be doing whatever they want to be doing, and they're towering over you because they've gotten taller than you now, and they can articulate their wants and their needs and their skills, then it's pretty convincing. Okay, you're right, I'll change my mind, you can go do this thing with your friends. Forgetting that socially and emotionally, they might not have all the skills to prepare them to handle whatever is going to come up for them. So let's talk a little bit about the science backing of it. I'm going to be very honest and say there's a reason that I'm a coach and a counselor and not in math and science, but it is important to look at what we know about where adolescents and teenagers are. So the development of the limbic system in the amygdala is kind of the emotion house, and they're getting fairly developed by this point in time. By teenagehood, they've learned those skills, and it's growing and developing well. Okay, it doesn't mean that they're not erratic and that they're not emotional, but this is part of that development, is that they're experiencing more and they're in touch with more of that emotion. On the other hand, the prefrontal cortex, so it kind of develops back to front, the prefrontal cortex is pretty behind. And not any more behind than we expect it to be, but this is the part of the brain that is going to be developing last and even into mid-20s. So as convincing as they are that they are grown up and ready and they know all the things, if you look at this graph here, you can see just how much growth they still have left to go. 5-year-old preteen, this is where a lot of you all have children kind of in here. The teen brain has made a lot of progress, but even by 20s and mid-20s, they're still working on this part of the brain that has to do with executive function, that has to do with impulsivity, judgment, making good judgment calls, decision making. And there's a lot of decisions and judgment that needs to happen in high school and in the years after they leave the home as well. Now, a big part of this to me is how these two, where it is getting more developed and where it's not quite as developed yet, how this connects and intermixes, all right? So what we know is that if we know that the emotional part of them is developing a little bit faster, the judgment impulsivity part of them is developing a little bit slower, then it kind of has a little bit of a conflict, a little bit of a contrast there that I'm sure you can attest to if you have a teenager, you work with teenagers, we see. There's a bit of a mismatch between the development of these regions, okay? We've got the limbic system, the hormone-fueled system that's really doing a lot of things. So we know they're quite emotional, right? But then the impulse control, decision-making, judgment, just organization in general with executive functioning is a little bit behind. But emotionally, they think they're good, and they're passionate, and they're intense, and they want to do it. So we see that clash of, I'm passionate, I want to do it, I've got all these feelings, and actually maybe I'm not making the best decisions or the best judgment calls with all those emotions. And with puberty starting earlier for our children, this clash is happening even earlier as well. So we can expect that this clash between what they really want to do, the passion, and the actual capability is happening even earlier and is really potentially creating more chaos for a little bit longer for both our children and ourselves. So do we just say, okay, it's just going to be passionate and intense and erratic for longer? Well, no, this is actually somewhat good news, and we can use it to our advantage that our children's brains are even more all over the place for longer. Because what this really means is that their brains are flexible, that there's plasticity there that we as parents can help to mold them and guide them in the right direction even more. There's even more potential for growth if we see it that way. If you're a brain person, you might like this picture. It's just showing that as they're getting older, more connections are being built in the brain. So what this means is, just like I've said, the flexibility, the impact that we have to make positive connections in the brain, to help them make the things happen that we want or we want to encourage them to happen, the pro-social behavior. There's more opportunity for us to have that influence and for them to make connections in their brain that are going to lead them to success. Okay, so we're going to move away from the brain stuff and move into what this looks like in our everyday lives. There's a phrase called the peer-oriented child, and it's important that we understand this because I think a lot of us can relate to this, even in the ELC kids. If we think about our children from when they're very little, and we think about how tired we get working with them, and how overwhelming they can be, and how much we just want to sit and relax and take one deep breath without someone coming up to us, it's understandable that quite often we want to keep them busy. We want them to say, I know I probably repeat the phrase, go play with your friends when we're around friends, probably 50 times if I'm around friends and other children, and I say, please go play with them. Why are you talking to me? Please go play with the other children, right? We put them in the activities. They're at school all day. By the time they're little and get to middle school, high school, they've gotten quite accustomed to being independent, to not needing us for connection, for insight, and then by the time they're teenagers, for survival, really either, right? They can kind of fend for themselves. So we've done a little bit too good of a job in having them be independent by the time that they are in the teenage years. We've continually sent the message, please go be busy doing something else, and so they have, and they do by the teenage years. But that's to the detriment of our connection and the influence we may have with them on their daily lives by the time that they're teenagers. By the time they're teenagers, there's a loss of adult relationships, okay? So we all know that the relationship children have when they're in the ELC, when they're in the elementary school, is quite important. And they really enjoy their teachers, or maybe don't, but it's important to them. Their relationship is important to them. By the time it's middle school and high school, they're not going to have all the same connections or a strong connection with their teachers. Part of this is just how they see lots of teachers at one time, right? But another part of it is that it's not really cool anymore to have a close relationship with an adult, or to even like an adult. And it's also not for parents. There's pressure to go along with the stereotypes and just accept the stereotypes of they're emotional, they're erratic, they don't want to be with us, they only want to be with their friends. They don't like us anymore as parents. It's just that kind of phase. We just have to let them go for a few years and they'll come back when they need us in adulthood. So there's peer pressure on both sides, both for the children and for the adults, to kind of have a natural separation, which isn't necessarily so natural and also isn't necessarily serving you as the parents or the students. So let's look at some interesting accidental research. Are they actually as independent as we think and that people say teenagers are? Or is this kind of just how society has evolved? So there's a really interesting there's a really interesting story in the South African Wildlife Reserve of these wild, well, I guess they're not quite so wild if they're in the reserve, but white rhinos. So what the rangers in the wildlife reserve started realizing is that the rhinos were starting to die off at a really fast rate. But actually they were getting killed. So they kept finding all these rhinos that had been killed. And they thought it was poachers. They couldn't really figure out why. They tried to see if they needed to keep poachers out more. And actually what they realized is that years before, in this same reserve, they had had to reduce the elephant population because of overpopulation. They couldn't manage all of the elephants that they had there, okay? So what they decided to do was to get rid of some of the elephants, some of the adult elephants, deciding that the young elephants in the herd troop, the group of elephants, didn't need the adults anymore. They were old enough to fend for themselves. Okay? They weren't fully mature, but they were old enough they could figure it out without the adults. So they got rid of some of the adult elephants, leaving the adolescent elephants to fend for themselves. And what they realized was that these adolescent elephants had banded together without the guidance of their parents, of the adults. They had bonded together and started creating a lot of mischief, including bullying, stomping on, and ultimately killing the rhinos because they had no guidance. They had no adult elephants still guiding them, even though they could survive physically, yes, on their own, emotionally, socially, these elephants did what they wanted, which included cleaning the rhinos. So what the rangers did is they reintroduced a male elephant into the group. The male elephant came in and over time got them back on track, taught them the social skills that they still needed, and kind of worked them into shape. The rhinos stopped being killed, the elephants were back on track, all just with putting an adult back in to kind of give them some guidance. Okay, and this is obviously elephants and rhinos, but we can think of the same kind of effect when we think of like teenage gangs or groups of individuals, groups of teenagers that kind of get into things when they don't have that adult guidance. Same for monkeys in a lab. They found that the ones that their parents got taken away earlier on had similar antisocial behavior when they weren't being raised. Even though they were out of infancy, out of toddlerhood, technically they could survive on their own, they immediately went into a lot of antisocial behavior and couldn't get along with each other when they no longer had that adult guidance. So, moral of the biological and behavioral story, we think about the brain, we think about these animals and the wildlife, and also if we think about just teenagers we know in different areas of the world. Your teenager, your adolescent still needs you, despite their most convincing argument that they don't. And I think this is the big point, right, is that by middle school, maybe even elementary school, but definitely middle school and high school, they're sending a pretty clear message, like, Mom, Dad, I'm good. Don't leave me alone. I've got this. I can handle it. Me and my friends are okay. We're doing well. Like, please leave me alone. Yeah, and they can be pretty convincing. And they're also independent enough, right? And we know that they're cognitively advanced and mature in some ways that they do have it under control in a lot of ways. But they don't have it under control in all of the ways, especially emotionally and socially. So they still need that scaffolding. Okay. By the way, I completely failed to mention, but there are papers here if you'd like to do some of your own reflecting. No pressure. I know you're not here to be in school yourself necessarily, but if you'd like to take some notes or reflect, think through things on your own, there is papers in the middle, yeah, and some pins if you want to take some notes or answer these questions on your own first. So I'm curious, and you can answer out loud, you can answer in your head, whatever works best for you. what is the goal of adolescence and teenagehood? And since we have such a wide range of ages of parents and children here, we'll consider adolescence, that 8, 9 years old all the way into adulthood. So what is the goal of this period of time? What do you think the goal is for parents in general? What's the goal for you as an individual? Or for that you want for your children? What's this point in time for? What's the purpose of it? Does anybody want to share? Or just write it down. Okay.
One important thing that you mentioned earlier is how do you keep that connection throughout? You don't just say, okay, they're gone for a few years and they come back. How do you maintain that connection so you don't have to have that desert period in between?
Yeah. So for your child or children, you would want them to stay connected to you as a goal.
Because they'd likely be living away from home, so seeing them just a couple of times a year, how do you maintain that bond?
Yeah, great. The bond, yep.
In terms of building the skills so that they can navigate life without you
Yeah.
as they get out into the world.
Absolutely. There's a lot of human skills to learn between the ages of 8 to 24 years old, right? Absolutely.
Defining themselves more and the basis to which they're gonna.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that one especially because a lot of times we hear, teenagers are finding their identity, right? It's a time to find themselves, find their identity, and they're doing this by being with other teenagers and exploring the options and kind of experimenting with what that looks like in their peer groups. And this is a big part of it, but we're going to talk a little bit more about whether they should only be finding their identity with other teenagers. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also important to also state that while they're at home, that's the time when they're going to make a lot of mistakes, and we're going to be there to guide them because yes, there will be times when they insist, and sometimes it's you want to be able to put your foot down and say no, you're not, you're still young, you don't understand, you will understand when you're older, but then it seems like you're being dictative or authoritarian, and you want them to learn. You're like, okay, if you think you can do it, and then they realize they're wrong, and then they're able to circle back and be like, okay, mom, why did that happen, or why did it end up like that? That's the perfect time to be able to put them right. Versus when they eventually go out, they will, as adults, they understand, what happened.
Absolutely, and I love that part of it, that balance there that you mentioned of letting them go out and make the mistakes and learn how to do it on their own, and also, and that's the big part of it, is that they feel safe enough to come home and process it and learn and want to share with you the mistake to figure it out better for next time, right? Because we do want that. We do want them to go out and explore and make mistakes within a range. But then the important part of that is learning from the mistakes and feeling like they have a safe space to return to when maybe things didn't go as they were hoping to. Yeah, absolutely. We've covered this a bit already. So the goal of adolescence and teenagehood, they're learning themselves, they're learning those life skills. They often want to just kind of get through middle school, high school unscathed, more or less, make friends, get the grades that they need to, and fit in, right? They want to fit in at this time. And then as parents, helping them do that and having that safe space, and you all have answered brilliantly for me, to make sure we're keeping the goal of staying connected to them so that they can become independently. And this is just a short way of saying exactly what you said, of giving them that space to explore, to make mistakes, to take risks, but on their own, and then being willing to come back to us, being connected enough to come back to us and work through some of these things so that they're doing it in a way that they're actually independent and not taking risks in a risky way and making big decisions that are going to change their lives in a negative manner long term. So the key to all of this is when and how we are scaffolding their success. It's because really some of these things I'm suggesting is it's quite a fine line between being too overbearing, being that helicopter parent, being that parent that is saying, oh no, your brain is not developed enough, you may not go out by yourself, you're not going to make good decisions, you're going to be impulsive, you're going to have bad judgment, like I can't let you walk out of the house without me, or without me watching you from some technology, or supervising every minute. We don't want that as well, right? We need them to become independent, but we need them to do it independently with our support. So how are we scaffolding their success, and when are we doing it? And of course, I go into all of this, bringing up this topic and bringing up this information, knowing that it is much, much, much easier said than done. And knowing that all of it is not going to apply to every single situation, every single child, every single family unit. So you take what is helpful to you and you leave the rest. And knowing that you're not going to be able to do all of this perfectly 100% of the time, or probably even 75, 90, 80% of the time, and that's okay. That's not what this is about. It's about having the information and trying your best. Okay, so we're just going to walk through now some things that you can, some practical things to think about, to do with your children from early on. This is setting the stage, even if you have those ELC kids or younger, right? Setting the stage so that when they are teenagers, you don't have to backtrack. Or if you have those middle schoolers, you have those teenagers, there's still time. Remembering how flexible that brain is, there's still time to set these goals and make these goals with your children. So number one thing, to be confident and remember your influence. They might, again, come to you and say, even as my 6-year-old, I've got it. Or think of that toddler walking around. No, I can do it by myself. Leave me alone. I've got it. And as toddlers, we more or less know, like, okay, we'll let them do it, but they're probably going to need our help, right? They're much more convincing when they get to the teenage years when they say, I've got it, I don't need your help. But we know from the brain science, we know from those stories of the rhino and the elephant and the monkeys, right, that they've got it more, yes, and also they still need our influence. So just a couple another little bits of research to motivate us and to show us that we really do still make a difference. Research shows that risky behavior choices actually the behavior actually aligns more with choices of parents compared to choices of peers. Okay, so we're still modeling for them. They're still watching us. They're still looking to us to see kind of what the norm might be. Additionally, adolescent brain activity tends to mirror parent brain activity. So if we're in a good place, they're more likely to be in a good place. Their brains, whether they know it or not, are still looking to us to see how should I respond, what should I do, what choices should I make. They might not be willing to admit that verbally, but research shows that somewhere in there, they're still very much looking to us. Listen. Okay, this is always one of those ones that seems so obvious, and you've probably heard it 100 times, but it's always worth a reminder because it's so hard to do. So offer. Something as simple as, will you talk to me about this? I'm not going to respond. I will just listen. I will not say anything back. Can be really powerful. At age 3 to 33 plus, right? Like promising them that they can open up to you and that you are not going to lecture, you are not going to give advice, you are not going to react in any kind of way, you'll try your best, you are simply going to listen to them. And offering that before a conversation starts can be very meaningful. Ask them to talk. Sometimes we think, oh, they're closed off, oh, they've gone to their rooms and closed the door, oh, they want to be with friends, and so they've decided, right? But giving them the invitation over and over and over again, and eventually they will say, okay. Might be 100 times they've turned you down and rejected you, and that can be hard, but one time they will say yes. Actually refrain from responding sometimes. It is so powerful to just not respond. People, I mean, obviously whole professions like mine exist because all of us as humans are so devoid in just having someone that can sit and listen and not respond when you just want to talk. And be creative. And when I say this, what I mean is that try out different things because every child is going to be different to when they're actually going to want to talk. I love talking in the car, right? Because you take off that pressure of eye contact. You take off that pressure of like sitting and awkwardly looking at someone, and this is more intense when I have to look at you, or I'm looking all around, or we're sitting and it feels like we can't really escape. But in the car, you also can't escape, which is actually for your advantage. But there's less pressure to have all these social norms of being attentive for both you and your child. Maybe they have a favorite place they like to go to that they might open up a bit. Maybe they'll open up more on a bike ride or whatever. Know your child, experiment, and see when you can listen best as well. So just a couple more specific things you can try for any age. This works even with adults. It can be effective. To ask them when they're having a problem, do you want to be hugged, helped, or heard? Okay, because sometimes they don't want to be listened to, they just need a hug, even as teenagers, right? Sometimes they do actually want you to come in and help them problem solve a situation with their friends or a situation at school or whatever. And sometimes they just want to be listened to. So by actually asking them, they can let you know what they need, and they're much more willing to come back to you another time because they know that you're not going to necessarily just put on them whatever you think they need in that moment. As parents, we tend to be problem solvers. Right? We hate seeing our children in pain or suffering or struggling unnecessarily. But sometimes, and the way that we can prepare them for the next step is to help them do it on their own and to listen through it. So asking them what they need helps them with that, but also helps them be in touch with figuring it out for themselves, checking in with themselves to be like, oh, what do I need in this moment? Because that actually, as adults, we can be quite poor at this as well, knowing what we need in any given moment to feel better. And this is a really effective one that everyone can try at work, with your children, with your spouse, with friends. Count to 10 before you respond. So welcome. So when someone talks, when your child is saying something to you, count to 10 in your head, not out loud. Count to 10, and then respond back. And what this does is it gives them space to keep talking. And it gives them space to say maybe some of those things that they feel a bit awkward about saying, or they're not sure they should share with you, or doesn't come to their mind at first, but they need that time to verbally process and reflect as well, so they can open up a bit more and deeper when you're having these conversations. Now, at first, this might feel a bit awkward, because we're so unaccustomed to being listened to. So they might be like, hello, are you there? Do you hear me? But as long as you're not occupied by phones or other things, they'll know that you're listening. So it might be a weird experience at first, but I really, really, really encourage you to try this one with anyone, in work meetings, wherever. Whenever I used to call my father when I was in university on the phone, I would be talking, and then I'd stop, and I'd be like, hello? Are you there? Like, I thought he had hung up or was completely ignoring me, and he would say, yeah, I'm just listening. And it would be so shocking because we're so unaccustomed to just listening, but it made me feel safe enough to keep talking that I was actually being heard. So I really encourage you to try one or both of these. Befriend the competition. Okay, so I know this is kind of in severe language, but really, in a joking manner, of course, their peer group and their friends from elementary on are kind of our competition, right? They want to hang out with their friends. They want to be with their friends. They say, Mom and Dad aren't cool anymore. I want to be with my friends. Go away. Okay? So when we're thinking about connecting with our children, when we're thinking about having some kind of relationship with them, the friends kind of become the competition in this way, right? Because we're competing for their time, their energy, their influence. And this is really what we're seeing, is that children now, it's kind of like the blind leading the blind. If we think about those elephants, we think about those monkeys, they weren't unhappy necessarily to, we think about if any of you had to read Lord of the Flies in school, that I read it in middle school, I think it was a bit traumatizing. But if we think about those kinds of stories, right, children, adolescents aren't unhappy necessarily to be led by each other. They may even seek it. But if we look at the research, we look at the history, we look at where their brain is at, it's very much the blind leading the blind. Because they're all in the same lost situation together, right? So if they're constantly going to their friends or majority of the time hanging out with their friends, they're looking to the friends for influence. They're looking to their friends for advice and support and modeling. And we really want them to be looking to us, not 100%, but still in some way. Okay? So how can we do this? Well, we get to know their friends as well. And we care about their friends as part of the community as well. So some ideas to do this: make your home a safe, non-judgmental space. If we talk to teenagers, if we talk to middle schoolers, even elementary schoolers, you will find that they enjoy going to the homes in which they don't feel overly on top of or overly judged by the parents or the adults that are there. It feels safe to them. They can open up even to that parent in a way that they might not feel comfortable doing so with their own. Be around. Simply your physical presence, whether that's driving friends, your children and their friends around and just overhearing their conversations, being around in the kitchen while they're all getting a snack. Just your physical presence has a lot of impact without you even saying or engaging in any kind of way. Okay? Be a part of their lives, in the same way, but just the little actions. Feeding them and their friends, driving them and their friends, inviting them and their friends over and really making an effort to get to know their friends and show an interest in their friends' emotional, social, academic lives makes a huge difference. Also because if they really love their friends, they see that you're willing to put in an interest with something that they really love and care about in their lives as well, that it's important to you also. Feed them. And I'm putting this in bold because I'm sure many of us can attest to the fact that children love being fed. They always want to be fed. So this is the easiest way in with them and their friends to build that community, to get to know them, and to earn some kind of a brownie points with the group. Yeah? Get to know what their favorite food is, surprise them on a random afternoon with it, sit down and chat with them, which they might give you the side eye for at first, but if it's a part of the package, they will probably accept. And feed them while you're getting to know and connecting with their friend group as well. Lastly, getting to know their parents. Getting to know your friends' parents is a great way to build that community that village that we all talk about and say that we don't have. And also getting to know where the friends are coming from, what their background is, what their family values are. And again, just showing that interest in this part of your child's life that is huge to them. Because if we see it as separate, if we see it as, okay, this is my time with my child, family time, then they have this other part of them, this other world that we don't really know a whole lot about, then of course there's going to be this disconnect. So the more that we can kind of merge them together, the more that we can at least have an understanding of what's going on there, and a welcoming into, kind of in and out with our children, the more that we can stay connected. Because the fact of the matter is, at some point in time, they are more peer-oriented. And that's just where our society is at. So we do need to counter some of this by befriending the competition, so to speak. Time. Okay, and this is going to be, again, a bit more of a hard one to swallow for a lot of us who are busy parents, which is everyone here. But it really does matter, especially at the adolescent age, okay? A lot of times we think, right, we put in so much time, we put in so much energy, put in so much thought into the early years, we're tired. I only have a 6-year-old and I'm tired. And like, this parenting thing goes on quite a while, doesn't it? So by the time they get to middle school, high school years, you're tired, understandably. And you think, right, they've got it figured out, they're independent, they're good, they don't need my time as much, which is just inherently not accurate, okay? Research shows that adolescents who spend more time with both parents had some better behavior and math scores, Okay, so it's impacting their academics as well, the time we're spending with them. Parents who spend time with adolescents matters just as much, like I said, at this age, if not even more, as it did when they were little. Which again, I know can maybe evoke some guilt or some tiredness or some overwhelm or some like, oh man, that's not what I thought the teenage years were. I thought we were easing out of that. But the fact of the matter is, they still very much need you in a different way, but they still very much need your presence. We often hear the idea of, okay, well, if we can't give quantity of time, give it quality. Which can be true, it's better than nothing, but I also want to let you know that it really is both, okay? If you don't have a lot of time, but the time you have it with them is good, then of course, yes, this will help. But you may find that your relationship is more like a favorite aunt or uncle or a favorite cousin who they only see a couple of times a year. The times are great, but it's going to be automatically more of a disconnected relationship, okay? Of course, you give what you can when you can, but it is about quantity as well. It's about that consistency of being around and present with your child, no matter what age they are, if they're in your home. Again, being creative. I mentioned this earlier, but it's so important. You, just like when they were children, they will thrive off of you experimenting, getting to know your child, and doing whatever you've got to do to connect with your child as an individual. Maybe that means you're sitting on the couch and learning some video game that you think is ridiculous, but they're really into it, so you sit down and ask them to teach you how to play for an hour, okay? Or they like going to the gym. I worked with a parent once and she was like, well, all she does is go to the gym. I don't want to go to the gym. I'm not very athletic. But that's what her daughter loved doing. So you know what she did? She went to the gym and she felt awkward and self-conscious and whatever, but her daughter was thrilled, right? Because she was welcomed, she asked to be a part of her world. And her daughter welcomed her in and they could spend some quality time together. Having some resets. So if you think of, sometimes we get to a place, we get busy, maybe that quantity of time hasn't happened, life happens, it's okay. But if you think about, say, time with a good friend, or time with your partner even, we often need these kind of retreats, or these times where we're spending more intentional, longer-term time together. Maybe you've taken a holiday just with your partner to reconnect, to build that bond again after you've been really busy and kind of disconnected. It looks the same with your child. If you're feeling disconnected, if you've had a particularly busy school year perhaps, take a whole day with just that child. If you have multiple children, of course, this will take more planning, but take a whole day. If you can manage, take a couple of days just with the one child, a holiday. It might be awkward for the first 2 days. The third day will probably be fantastic if you're there and present and really diving into this relationship with them, okay? Take some resets and really be just attuned to what your child might need, because sometimes it might look like longer periods of time to reconnect. Insist. Sometimes we need to think of the time we have with our children as being the leader of a team, or being the manager of a team, okay? Sometimes the manager of a team, or sometimes your boss, might have all of the people that they're leading, all of the workers, engage in team bonding that they don't really want to do, that they're going to complain about, that they're going to hem and haw over, but you do that forced team bonding, and it helps, right? It helps the team be a team and be engaged and be willing to be a part of it. And this is very much how we can see this process as well. We are leading a team. Our family is the greatest team we will ever lead and be a part of. And sometimes we, as the leaders of it, the managers of it, so to speak, need to step up and say, this is what we're going to do. I know that you don't see the benefit of it, or you're going to complain, or you're going to go on social media or let your friends know how terrible your parents are, but this is what we're going to do today because it's important that we spend time together. Family meetings. I'm a huge advocate for having family meetings. And this sounds official and intense. You can call it something different, but it's for the same purpose. When we go to our workplaces, when we're a part of any other team ever, we have intentional times where we are getting together and discussing and reflecting and planning and setting aside time to make things happen. And this is no different in our families and with our children. Okay? We think it should be more relaxed. If it seems weird with our families, we should just naturally hang out and get together and bond. But all of us are busy. And for most of us, this simply isn't going to happen if we're not very intentional. So sometimes that means, and I think it's a great benefit anyways, scheduling a family meeting for once a month, or once a week, or once every other week, or once a quarter, it doesn't matter. Scheduling a meeting, insisting that everyone comes, maybe getting some of their favorite food, or going to a favorite restaurant, or whatever, and sitting down with everyone and just talking about what you need to talk about, and kind of, again, that forced family bonding. Mindset and expectations. This is a huge part with this age range, okay? They know what to say to press your buttons. They know you enough by now, they've been in a relationship with you long enough by now, that they know how to get to you. And now remember, that emotion part of their brain is doing well and firing, so they're gonna sometimes be led by that emotion to just hurt your feelings, potentially, or say something to get what they're hoping to get, right? But it's not personal, it's where they're at. It's just part of who they are right now. If we can lead and not take it personally, they're much more likely to move out of this phase faster, rather than engaging in kind of the ego trip with them. It's an intense and fun period of time. Remember, having that reframe, saying that they're passionate and determined, rather than erratic and emotional, which they totally are, but if you can see it as this really special time developmentally, then you're going to be much better off in trying to cope with it and manage it and want to be a part of it, yeah? Something that you don't feel like you need to escape from. Going back to what you're enjoying in this chapter. So it's so similar to when your children were small babies or toddlers or whatever. We can enjoy it much more once we're past it. They're like, oh, remember how cute they were, remember how they did this cute little thing, they said this cute little thing. But in the moment, sometimes we're ready to like push them out the door and say, I'm tired, I'm done with this, right? It's harder to be in the moment and enjoy it while you're in it. But trying to remember, just like you might have done when they were younger, trying to remember what's really great about this period of time. Adolescence and the teenage years in particular are a really, really cool, special time for children and for you as parents. Probably many of us have strong memories, positive or negative, of our teenage years, even now. It's an important and special period of time. And the more that we can try and hold on to this mindset, the easier it'll be when our child is acting like who knows what in the teenage years with the hormones and the emotions and that lack of prefrontal cortex development, right? And then with this as well, just redefining your concept of teenagers. Remembering and thinking of them not having that biological and intellectual maturity trick you into thinking that they've got it all under control and that they don't need you. Redefining your concept of teenagers to remember that they're still young in a big person's body, they still need you, they're still quite vulnerable, and they're still quite sweet. They're still quite innocent in a lot of ways. They're still quite fun in a lot of ways. They're not the full mature adult that they're trying to convince you they are, or maybe even physically presenting. Meeting them at their level. This one is especially important in the teenage years and in the adolescent years, okay? Because the difference between them and like a toddler or a baby is that they know themselves better, and they are more mature, and they do have presence and abilities that they didn't have before. So be genuinely interested in their interests. Like I said, if that means sitting and playing video games or talking about some song or whatever they want to talk about that you think is totally absurd, doesn't matter. Be genuinely interested in what they want to talk about. Again, have those meetings and check-ins with them. Do it at their favorite places. Do it during their favorite activity. Do it while you're in the car driving somewhere, but you've gotten them a treat in the back and you can engage with them a bit more. Woo them. I know it sounds kind of weird for this topic, but it's very much you're trying to get your child to still be interested in you. And at this point in time, with the peer pressure, where they're at developmentally, you need to convince them that you're still worth being around sometimes. That you're still their loving parent, that you still love them, that you're maybe not cool enough, but that you have something worth offering them still. that there is something about your relationship with them that is special, that cannot be replaced by their friends, that cannot be replaced by their teachers, that cannot be replaced by social media or whatever, you need to convince them that there's something about your relationship that they actually can benefit from and need, right? And of course, still don't, again, I'm saying it again because it's that important, don't take it personally, okay? Because you're gonna try and woo them and try and get them on your side, on your team, and they're gonna say, no thank you, not interested. But they might actually still be interested, and that's just what they think that they need to say, right? Or that's the automatic response. Think of their attitude. If they have some attitude, or they're like, no, I don't want to hang out with you, that telling you, like, okay, fine. Think of that as a temporary accent. Teenagers have a temporary accent that they use. It's not super kind all the time, or not super respectful all the time, but it's simply that, and they will move out of it the more that we can ignore it and continue to engage with them and want a relationship with them. Be interested in the right things. I'm repeating myself some here, but it's important because it's so easy to forget, again, when they come to you with this attitude, or they come to you with a lack of interest or that empathy someone mentioned earlier. Ask them regularly, while you're chatting with them, be specific and check in with them. These are my words, you don't have to use my words, but in your own words, treating it like a relationship, treating it like a manager and someone you're leading, okay? What can I do to be there for you? What do you need from me right now? How do you want to feel connected to me? Like, when do you like hanging out with me? What's something you want me to know about you? These more intentional, feels a bit impersonal, but these more intentional, driven questions can be really meaningful, and you might just be surprised how willing your child is to answer. Even from early ELC days, asking them some of these more pointed, direct questions, they might be much more able and interested to answer you than you expect. It's kind of like a boss review, as long as you don't take it too personally, okay? Kind of like a review of your performance. And be mindful of your involvement in other areas of their life. Okay, so again, whatever they're interested in, be interested and passionate about it too. Even if that has to be the greatest performance of your whole life, because you care nothing about whatever they're really passionate about. Okay? And lastly, don't give up. We've talked about this, but I just want to say it again. They're not done needing you. They're never done needing you. Probably many of us in this room can talk about how we still want help from our parents, or wish we had help from our parents, or want that emotional support, whether we're actually able to get it or not. We always look to our parents if we have that right relationship for support. Thinking about, on those hard days, thinking about what type of relationship you want with them when they're your age and they have their own children. What type of relationship do you want with them in 10 years? What is that going to look like in 20 years? And more importantly, what are you doing right now to make sure that that happens? And what are you doing right now to ensure that they want to have a relationship with you at this period later on in life? Because once they do leave the house, they have the option then to not have that relationship. And so these are the prime years to make sure that your children and yourselves want to continue that relationship when they no longer need to. The biggest thing with all of this is to be consistent. It's really easy, for myself included, to, once we go to a talk like this, or once we read a book, or once we have a good chat with our kid, to feel inspired, motivated, and then a couple weeks down the road we get tired or forget, life moves on, and we just get out of the habit. So make these things a habit, find what works for you, and be consistent. Lastly, seek support for you and your family. If it's hard to do these things, or there's a block in some kind of way, and you're not quite sure what that block is, your child is having an issue kind of connecting with you or vice versa, seek support. That's okay, right? It's okay for your child to seek support. It's okay for you to seek support, the whole family too, because the faster you can get through those blocks and figure out kind of where the pieces aren't aligning, the faster you can move forward so that you can actually do the things to just maintain. Just a last little piece of research here. A survey revealed that 84% of teenagers think highly of their mothers and 89% think highly of their fathers. We won't talk about that discrepancy, I don't know. More than 3/4 of teenagers enjoy spending time with their parents. And 79% enjoy hanging out with mom, 76% like hanging out with dad. These numbers are quite good. They're probably not what we would guess based on how teenagers actually act when adults are around, parents are around, right? But they still have this private life where they very much need and want and thrive off of a relationship and being with you as parents, even when they say they don't want it or just look at their phones the whole time that they're with you, okay? Internally, and we know after the fact that they really appreciate and need that time with you as a family, as parents. So lastly, I know we're short on time, so whether you want to think about this now, whether you want to bring these papers home and think about it later, up to you. Just thinking about what stands in the way of you connecting with your child right now, or your children, because it'll be different if you have multiple children, right? Thinking about what prevents you from doing some of these things, or what you can come up with. When I was giving suggestions of, oh no, my kid would hate that, or my kid wouldn't do that at all. What is standing in the way of connecting with your children? If you look at the sheets, this question is also on it, so feel free to bring that home and think through it a bit more. And last but not least, this time always goes fast. I so appreciate your attention and your level of engagement and coming here on the last week before break, because I know if you're like me, you're ready to just not be at school anymore. I love ASD, but you're probably ready for a little break. So I really, really, really appreciate you all being here this morning. Just as a little reminder, and if you want to get in touch with me or have any follow-up questions or updates based on this, I'd love to hear updates about how you incorporated or tried some of this information and ideas. I love hearing that kind of updates. Please feel free to update me of how these are going. You can find me on my website, a nice little easy QR code for Instagram there. Some of the services I can provide, I will be working until early May, and then I'll be busy. And then, of course, next school year as well, I'll be around and available, and I'm sure I'll see some of you around ASD. And last but not least, I just wanted to mention a webinar or workshop that I have coming up in just a few weeks. It'll be online in the evenings after, at least bedtimes if you have the little ones, hopefully. And I did a Talk Tuesday last year here about being a screen smart family, and it's going to be a lot of similar information, but we're going to tease through it a bit more, have the opportunity to work through it and make some plans for your own family. So it'll be a really great workshop just in time for the Dubai heat coming, when a lot of us want to just watch TV all day because it's too hot to do anything else. So do come to that if you are interested. The QR code for signing up is here as well. And thank you all so much for your time and attention. And lastly, there were some papers on the tables if you'd like to sign up for my newsletter. I only send one out about once a month. So I'm not too overwhelming, I promise, and it just usually has some reflection questions and ideas and lots of more information. So thank you all so much. I'll stay around if you have any questions, but thank you so much for your time.